Hi, everyone. My name is Erika Settles. I'm a permanency trainer with the Texas Institute of Child and Family Wellbeing. I also have previous experience with DFPS, so I've worked extensively with children in the foster care system. Today's training is engaging with youth in foster care. I just want to let you know that this training is geared towards Heart Gallery staff and volunteers, so there will not be CEUs provided for this training. So our training objectives today are to understand why empathy is essential for effective engagement, to illustrate the importance of creating a safe and trusting environment for youth, and to learn techniques to engage with youth by building rapport and connection. So empathy is essential for effective communication with youth. And just so that we're all on the same page, empathy is the act of perceiving, understanding, experiencing, and responding to the emotional state and ideas of another person. So for example, if you enter a room and your child is crying, an empathetic response would be noticing the child's upset, then responding maybe with a gentle touch, perhaps a request to see if she would like to talk, and then taking time to listen if that's what she wants. So while listening, you would likely be attentive, you would look at her when she is speaking, and you'd offer support with words. So in doing that, you would create a safe and supportive space for her, and she would likely feel understood and valued. So understanding is foundational to empathy. So to cultivate empathy for youth in foster care, it's helpful to understand some of their common experiences. So we know there are a myriad of reasons why children enter foster care, and it's essential to recognize that their personal history is private. So we want to refrain from making assumptions or passing judgments about their family situation. So capturing photographs of them during our interactions is typically going to be a one-time occurrence. So we can't fully grasp the complexities of their background after meeting them just one time. But there are some common experiences that we can learn from. So youth have experienced the trauma of being removed from their home. They've also, through that, experienced relational instability, educational disruptions, and emotional struggles, in addition to the developmental challenges that they are already facing for youth their age. So from being removed from their home, they might have been separated from their mom and or dad or whoever their parental figures were, any siblings that might have been in the home if they're not placed with them. While in foster care, they might have experienced a multitude of different placements. So each time they change a placement, there is disruption in their caregivers, in who lives in their neighborhood, in potentially their school environment, their teachers. So they're going through a lot as they're trying to navigate all of these changes, in addition to those things that they're already naturally developmentally enduring. So because of these things, they've learned tips and tools for survival at home and also in foster care that have kept them safe. So they may have learned to be adaptable, they might be super independent, they might be able to communicate with a variety of different people, they might be resourceful in finding solutions to meet their needs. So they might have different tools than other kids their age. So as is the case with all of us, youth in care have experiences that shape their behavior and also how they communicate with others. So their experiences may present as their social, emotional, and cognitive skills might be impacted, and this can look different for each youth. So the trauma and instability that they have in foster care may have led them to present as younger than their age in some areas. So a youth might engage in baby talk, or they might suck their thumb for comfort. And I'm talking about an older youth specifically here. They might lack an understanding of personal boundaries. They might give you a hug the first time that they meet you. They might seek frequent reassurance from you because they want to make sure that they're doing the right thing and they want to please you. Or it could be they've had a hard day, and the opposite, they don't want to engage in conversation. Maybe they're more standoffish or reluctant. They might feel anxious, and in that situation, they might even refuse to take a photo. It's also helpful to realize that their survival skills that they've gained might lead them to present as older than their age in other areas. So this could look like a strong sense of independence, insistence on doing things their way. They could display mature communication skills or take on responsibilities that aren't typical for their age. So it could feel confusing because you may hear them talking about sex one moment, then sucking their thumb a little while later. But it's just important to recognize that at the end of the day, they are just kids learning to navigate these experiences as best as they can. So now that we understand some of the experiences of youth, it might help us to be able to empathize with them. When we have empathy for a youth's experiences, it changes the way that we communicate about them, and it also changes the way that we communicate with them. So language is powerful, right? Because words have power. So the words that we use to define youth influences our thoughts and perceptions of them. And our thoughts and perceptions of youth in turn influence our behavior or how we treat them and respond to them. And most importantly, language impacts how youth see themselves. So how we communicate with them impacts their view of themselves. And we want to make sure that our language heals and does not harm. So we don't want to unintentionally use language that perpetuates negative stereotypes, that excludes youth, or that causes them harm. We want our language to promote respect and dignity. We want it to build their self-esteem, and we want to show them ultimately that they belong. So as a reminder, how we talk about youth in foster care frames how we perceive and interact with them. So here are some language considerations. So our language, first and foremost, should always consider the needs of the child. So we don't ever want to say something about a youth that we would not say if we were in front of them. To expand on that, we want to make sure we're using person-first language, as this highlights a youth's identity over their situation that they had no control over. So for example, we want to say a child or a youth who has experienced foster care versus calling them a foster youth, a foster child, or a foster kid. Youth in foster care are kids, and they have an identity outside of foster care. Just like any other kids, they have hopes and goals and dreams, and they're children first. So foster care is the situation that they are in, but it is not their identity. So when we use person-first language, it helps us get to know the youth and not just their perceived problem. And with that, we want to avoid deficits-based language because that depersonalizes the youth. We see them in that situation based on the label we attach to them versus their full personhood. So for example, calling a youth abused, neglected, or vulnerable child is giving them a defined label, as if they are a problem that needs to be fixed. It distracts us from seeing their full personhood. So we want to recognize that they are children first, and that what's happened to them is their experience, but it is not who they are. So they have likes, dislikes, hobbies, and interests, right? Just like any other kid, values and goals, and they're resilient and resourceful. So ultimately, how we communicate about youth impacts how we perceive and interact with them. So we never want to use outdated terms when we are interacting with them or talking about them. So for instance, the term orphan is derogatory to youth, and it literally means without parents. So if we use a term like that that says they have no parents, then we're likely to interact with them, negating the value of their families. Youth in foster care have parents, families, and they have a family history that is very important to them, and they have a cultural identity that has shaped them. So communicating with youth in foster care requires a thoughtful and sensitive approach. And it is important that we are creating a safe and trusting environment. It is essential to engaging with youth. So I want to introduce a term to you called felt safety. So felt safety happens when adults arrange the environment and adjust their behavior so that children can feel in a profound and basic way that they are truly safe. So this essentially means that we are adjusting ourselves, we're making changes in our environment, we are taking the lead so that a child feels safe. So even though we know that a child is safe, if they don't feel it, then they don't have that felt safety, and that's going to influence their behavior. So we want to make sure in our interactions with them that we are creating that felt safety. So an important way to do this is to build trust with the youth. So we want to make sure that the location you're taking heart gallery photos is warm, calm, and a welcoming environment. So to give an example, imagine you're having a long, hard day at work, and it's the difference between going home to a quiet, cozy environment in your house versus going to HEB where it's loud and bustling and there's music playing and lots of people. Those are going to create different feelings inside of you. So in the same way, a loud or an overstimulating environment can cause stress in some youth. And if a youth is stressed, they're not going to feel safe. And of course, if they don't feel safe, it's going to be difficult for them to engage. We also want to introduce yourself with a friendly tone of voice. So explain your role in words that they can understand. So think of your role in terms of, why are you spending time with them today? So they were likely told by their caseworker, but they meet a multitude of people throughout the life of their case. So it can be really confusing to realize who you are, what your role is. So it's always helpful to clarify to make sure that they understand who you are and why you're there and why they're there. Also important to understand, youth may get ready at a slower pace, so they might need to ease into the environment. So they might feel uncomfortable, or they may have had a hard day. So this just requires being patient and trying to alter their environment as much as possible to meet them where they are. This could look like offering snacks and water if possible, just doing things to help them feel more relaxed. If they make mistakes or something happens to upset them, they're going to need reassurance and validation. So if a youth gets frustrated and maybe they mention that they didn't think they took great photos, reassurance would be saying something like, I love how your photos capture your personality, or anything that you notice that would help comfort them in that situation. Another important thing is to try to capture them in their natural state. So there are some youth that love to pose and that are going to do all kinds of poses in front of the camera and have no problems with that, and you'll probably readily see that. But there might be other youth who are a little bit more anxious, don't like to smile and pose for the camera. So you're going to try to get them to laugh and capture them when they're laughing, and create an environment so that you can capture those natural photos rather than forcing them to pose if they're not comfortable doing that. So physical space and personal boundaries are also essential for youth in foster care. So to build trust, you want to always ask before using any type of physical touch. So if you want to shake a youth's hand or give them a high five when you meet them, just always be sure to ask first. If you need to place a mic on them for filming, explain why, let them know what you're doing, the purpose of it, and request permission before putting it on them. You also want to ensure that the youth has someone they feel comfortable with present in their line of sight at all times while you're in your photography session. So at times this might be challenging because a transporter might be the one to accompany the youth, and they might have just met the youth for the first time. And in that instance, you just would do your best to make the youth feel as comfortable as possible. But regardless if it's a transporter, a caseworker, a foster parent, CASA, or someone else that they know, let them know that they should stay nearby where the youth can see them throughout the process. And this is actually a Heart Gallery requirement as well. And then finally, you want to offer choices as often as possible. So choices help youth feel more in control and empowered in a situation that might not be comfortable for them. So you could let them decide what area in the vicinity that they want to take photos. So if you're at a park, maybe they want to go by the tree, or maybe they want to go on the swing. So just giving them some choice in the matter. If they want to sit or if they want to stand, if that's an option, just as many choices as you can so that they feel like they're in control, and that will help them to feel safe and comfortable and more likely to engage and participate in the photo session. So after you've built a foundation of trust, you also want to build rapport with youth. So to do this, you want to give the youth an overview of what they can expect throughout the day, as well as a play-by-play of what they'll be doing with you. So ask if they'd like to explore your equipment if you're a photographer, or if you're doing a video session. Maybe with photography that looks like looking through the viewfinder, or clicking the button to take a photo. So just getting them familiar with what you're doing, getting them comfortable. And you want to express a genuine interest in getting to know the youth as an individual. So you're going to ask easy to answer, open-ended questions about who they are. So this would be about their likes and dislikes, about their hobbies, their preferences. So open-ended questions versus closed-ended is, tell me something fun you did over the weekend versus did you have a good weekend? So if you're asking a youth, did you have a good weekend? It's easy for them to say yes, no, and that be the end of the conversation. But if you're asking them to tell you something fun that they did, then that might get them to expand on a situation or an event and can kind of get the conversation flowing. And when they talk, find a point of connection in what they've revealed to you or in what you've observed. So what made them light up or get excited? Kind of expand on getting more information on that to keep them talking and help them feel more comfortable with you. You want to make sure that only appropriate information is shared though. So when we're doing a point of connection and trying to find that with youth, we want it to be based on their interests. We don't want to share our own traumatic experience or something more serious that happened. We just want to keep it light. You're just meeting them, just getting familiar with them. You just want to find a point of connection and what they've already discussed with you. Of course, you can share information about yourself to reciprocate the connection, but just make sure it's related to what they've already told you. So if there's a doubt in your mind about, oh, should I share this? Should I not share it? Just keep it to yourself in that situation and just keep it light and focused on what you've already discussed. It's a big deal for some youth in care to interact with strangers. So if they are engaging with you, definitely don't take it lightly and give them your full attention. So this looks like active listening, where you give your undivided attention whenever they're speaking to you and you avoid interrupting, and you're demonstrating you're engaged with nonverbal cues like nodding and eye contact, just like you would with any other person you're having a conversation with. You also want to use affirming language to acknowledge youth. So for example, maybe they just sat through several photos. It took a lot of focused attention. You would want to let them know you noticed that. So say something like, wow, we just took a bunch of photos. I know that wasn't easy, but you were focused and you did really great. And that'll kind of let them know that they're doing well, they're on the right track, and that you're recognizing that this might not be an easy experience for them. Clarifying questions are used to seek additional information, so they help you make sure that you're clear on whatever is being communicated to you. So with youth, this would look like staying curious and asking questions that get them to expand on what they're saying. So can you tell me more about that soccer game you played in this weekend? Or what did you mean when you said the game was tough? And then that can get them to expand on the conversation that they've already started with you. And then we have reflective responses, and these are statements or phrases that validate the thoughts or feelings expressed by someone else. So reflective responses provide reassurance and validate the youth. They utilize statements or phrases that show you're listening, that you understand what's being communicated. So you're saying the game was tough because the other team was very skilled, or it seems like you feel a little frustrated about losing the game, but proud of how well you played. So again, just responses to show that you're listening and you understand what they're saying. If something you said isn't an accurate reflection of what they said, then that gives them the opportunity to correct you and change the conversation to what they actually meant. So in conclusion, here are some helpful reminders. You want to keep the conversation lighthearted and focused on the child's interests. You want to be mindful of conversation topics. If a youth opens up to you, be receptive and validate their feelings to the best of your ability. Avoid using language that assumes information about the youth. So this would be like their feelings about adoption. You don't want to assume or even necessarily talk about that unless they've brought it up already, but you don't want to assume any information about that. You don't want to assume that just because they're a particular gender that they'd be interested in a specific topic. You also want to be continuously mindful of personal space and boundaries. So this goes back to always asking before using physical touch. Youth might want touch or a hug at some point, but that doesn't mean that they want it continuously. So make sure that anytime you're using physical touch, you're always asking. You want to check in with the youth throughout the photo shoot and filming to make sure that they're doing okay. And especially if it seems like they're not, maybe they need a few minutes, maybe it's been very overwhelming and they just need a little walk or just to decompress for a little while, and that's okay too. And then if the youth discusses anything alarming or concerning with you, you do want to let their caseworker or transporter or whoever brought them know about that situation. So you want to listen, so avoid responding with shock if they share something concerning, and just listen and validate, but just be sure to let their caseworker or transporter know. So thank you all so much for attending this training. We do have a one-pager for you that kind of sums up all of the important points, and it also provides additional resources. So if you're attending live, that will be emailed to you. For those listening to the recording, please reach out to me and I will email that to you. And for all of you, this is my contact information. If you have any questions going forward, you can feel free to reach out to me. Also, that's the Heart Gallery of Texas website. We do have additional training for professionals and for caregivers as well. That is updated regularly. So if you're interested in that, you can go to the website for that as well. Again, thank you very much.